sponsors, and Leadership Circle members who invest in our vision every day to make Overland Park prosper. You see all of them on the screen. A few housekeeping items to note before we begin the program. All attendees' video and audio have been muted to limit distractions and background noise. We are going to have time for Q&A both throughout the program as well as at the end. You're welcome and encouraged to put your questions in the chat, and we'll monitor those throughout. Or at the end, you'll also be able to unmute yourself to ask a question of Angela. Please feel free to enjoy the program and let us know what your thoughts are as we're going throughout the morning. It's now my pleasure to introduce Matt Sheets, who's the Market President of FNBO. He's a great board member for the Overland Park Chamber, one of our corporate sponsors. Matt, we thank you so much for your leadership every day in the Johnson County region and appreciate so much your sponsorship of this series. And please take it away and let's begin.
Thanks, Tracy. I appreciate that. I want to welcome you all to the event this morning. It's a little obviously different than it has been in the past where we can't all congregate, but glad we're able to make this Zoom call. You know, at FNBO, we live our operating philosophy, which is the active involvement in helping our customers and our communities we serve to grow and to thrive. To that end, leadership is critical for successful businesses, organizations, communities, which is why we sponsor this speaker series. We have heard from a lot of outstanding leaders in the past, and this morning is no exception. So it's my pleasure to introduce Angela Hurt. And a little bit of background to Angela is she grew up in a tiny town in south central Kansas, graduated with a class of 45, which was it must have been during a baby boom because she said it was double the size of the typical graduating classes at that time. As an athlete, she followed her athletic pursuits into college where she was a volleyball star. And some of the leadership aspects she attributes to her experiences in volleyball and the roles that she was asked to play on her teammates and within her school, which I think you'll hear some of that at that point. She focused on business and marketing, and then towards the end, veered into computer information sciences as the major was at the time. Most importantly, Angela founded Veracity Consulting in 2006. And it was to bridge the gap between business and technology. And Veracity takes a more values-based approach to its consulting, focusing on doing the right thing for its own people and for the clients that they serve. It's a tech consulting group that fuses people, process, and technology to deliver customized solutions for the customers while focusing on the health and wellness of both the employees and the entire community. This will be a heavy thrust of the conversation as we go forward. So without any further ado, let me turn it over to Angela Hurt.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Matt, for that introduction and recapping that, and Tracy and everybody at the Overland Park Chamber for having me this morning. I will apologize for the distraction. I'm doing the blend that I love to do so much, and I'm sitting at the Lawrence Country Club about ready to play in a golf tournament. So I'm in an unfamiliar space for me with lots of things happening outside. So I'll do my best not to let that distract me. But for anybody that's on the Zoom call today, and any employees on kind of knows that I have a tendency to have a little squirrel action anyway, and kind of seeing what's happening out there. But yeah, thanks so much. And I look forward to the discussion today and the flexibility, Tracy. I'm kind of doing things a little bit different.
So Angela, what was the initial driving force for you to start Veracity?
Well, I had worked for several different companies here in the Kansas City market and kind of grew up within the consulting space and learning how different companies do different things. And while I had a little itch of entrepreneurship from my father and how he had done things, I think that I felt that in consulting, there's this tendency to I think that oftentimes if you have to hire an IT consulting company to come in to help you do something, you might have this fear that hard to a dealership, right? It's like, I don't know much about this space, and am I going to be taken advantage of, or am I going to be giving an honest approach to things? That's one. I wanted to be able to do things for my clients that I served, all of our clients who become, we're very relationship based, so they become friends and you want to do the right thing for them. But more importantly, I wanted to make sure that I could do something really great for the folks who worked for the organization, who actually are out doing the work on our behalf to our clients. And so I started the company with the premise in mind that you can take what is best for the client and what is best for your employee and meld those two things together and create a phenomenal service within our community. And another thing that I don't think we talked about yesterday, Matt, was in 2006 is when I remember the big supplier diversity push that kind of started happening. So you have all of these major large partners that companies like Sprint or Embark or, H&R Block or whoever, and that is the year that I really remember of working within the community of helping build businesses of diverse suppliers. And I was working for an East Coast based company, and we didn't have a lot of diversity. And I kind of looked around in the marketplace, and I saw that there were some IT staffing companies that provided those type of services that were diverse, woman or minority owned, but there really at that time was not any solutions-based organizations. So company who could come in and say, hey, Matt, what kind of problem are you having today? And how can I help you solve that? Not with a single person, but with an entire thought leadership wrapped around it. So that was kind of my push to make it happen. And certainly has been a wonderful experience for me. And I think a wonderful experience for many of the employees that we brought along, because we truly treat people in a different fashion.
Well, I'm going to move on to, actually, there's an interesting question that I have with respect to with diversity and inclusion being top of mind within the business community, and I think our communities in general. With respect to the supplier push, do you see any challenges? Do you personally see any potential issues as we're kind of going through this economic uncertainty? I know one of the things we're seeing is the rationalization and efficiency. So a lot of things are being purchased out of headquarters and maybe less locally purchased. So we're going for scale and size. Is that a trend that you're also seeing? And in that case, what would you do other than intentional focus? Could individuals and companies do to ensure that that diverse supplier base is continued to be sought after?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we do see that. So, take an example of an organization in the city area that's always been headquartered that maybe is no longer headquartered here. And how do you continue those relationships when it's being purchased out of another location? And so I think that is certainly an issue. I think I wouldn't say issue, it's definitely a challenge for a small, diverse company. I think the importance is organizations like ours have to show our value that is outside of our check marks that we would give to an organization that we work with. And that's driving, again, thought leadership, it's driving innovation, it's driving change for those organizations. But there's always this thing that I've always said, that we do such a great job of setting up opportunities for diverse businesses. I think we do a really great job of creating programs, but sometimes those programs, in my opinion, while it seems like a very do good and right thing to do, that I think sometimes unintentionally kind of small. And what I mean by that is you're a diverse business like Veracity. We go through a certification process every year. And what is the number one question that they ask for? They ask who makes all of the decisions, who signs the contracts, who does this, right? So as Veracity scales, Angie's no longer the only person who signs any sort of document. And I think that sometimes when we go through that process, that kind of limits scaling if you go by the letter of the rule of what they want you to see from that diversity. So I kind of went off on a little tailspin on that a little bit, but I do think that it could be a concern for companies if they don't have the right relationships at the right levels within their client base in order to continue to work with them as more things are pushed through corporate, so to speak, and by scale. And again, driving value versus it's going to be really easy to become commoditized if we're not careful on how we build relationships and how we present ourselves.
Well, thank you. So how would you describe your own leadership style?
Oh, it's always evolving. I think the reality is that it's pretty stable in the way that I view and see things. I'm the type of leader, as you mentioned earlier, growing up as an athlete, that my leadership development, it did not come because I was in a large corporation that put me through, leadership development training. My leadership training has always been on the court or on the pitch or whatever it may be. And I learned how to be diplomatic in a way and deliver news that was not always favorable. So whether it was volleyball or basketball, I tended to find myself in a position of team captain. I like to call assistant coach at that point because I really had to do a lot of the things that some of the coaches may not have wanted to have to do. But why it worked so well is because I was always on the court with them. So I'm part of that team. So it's today, today, one of the things that I love the most is still being in the action to the extent that I can be called on to help get us over the finish line. I want to make sure that people know that if they're being asked to do things, I'm willing to do it and have done it myself. And so often my leadership has become more of a servant type of next to you style versus leading from above. And that's how I think that's how we accomplish a lot.
As you said, your leadership has evolved. Obviously, I would presume some of that has to do with the growth that's been in your company and new challenges have come up. Any examples or any aspects that you'd like to speak to the challenges of leadership going from a startup to a growth company?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges. And I think the thing that I most love about it is, so Veracity's been in existence now for 13 years, and this is the longest I've ever worked any place. And I think the reason why I'm still able to do this is because I'm not bored. That, and I've wanted to quit before, but there's nobody to take my resignation. So that doesn't work out so well. But no, the thing that I love the most about it is the constant evolution and the change. And with that is a constant opportunity for me to grow. And so I will talk to the team and often say things like, you guys, I'm figuring this out just like we all are. And sometimes I feel like I'm learning on the job every single day. But some of the growth challenges, early on growth challenges, delegating, right? When you start a company and it's all you and it's your brand and doing things, it's delegating and letting go. I think everybody would agree that a difficult challenge is always hiring the right people. So early on, I would hire the people that I could afford, not the people I needed. And so once I was able to change that mindset of hiring the people I just couldn't quite afford, certainly helped me get to the next level, and then also help the delegation. So if you're delegating to somebody you truly trust has the job and you can walk away from it, that's always beneficial. But, over the years, the change has been becoming removed from I mentioned earlier when I started the company is that I wanted to create a place that people wanted to come to work. And I knew every person that we hired. I knew, any person that we brought on, I probably had some hand in the interview process, maybe the last hand on the interview process. I think one of the biggest challenges for me is having people on the team that I don't know now. And learning how to message and communicate throughout the entire organization without having my hands on every individual person. I don't know if that makes sense or not. But that has been probably one of my biggest leadership challenges is creating that feedback loop and communication to where I still feel connected and the team still feels connected to me, even if I'm not working with them day in and day out.
So in hearing you speak to that, I'm presuming that your selection of people, selection of promotions, and getting the right people in the right role is that intentional, continual focus on the values that you're looking to base your organization and how you make decisions. We talked about a number of attributes that relate to those values. I'd love if you could expand upon those now. And as a refresher, we were talking about accountability and flexibility and integrity.
Yeah. So Veracity, while we have our very important to us, I think that we've gotten to a place that we're going to live and die by our values as an organization. And so it's extremely important to me that not only do I find folks on my leadership team who obviously have to have the skill set and the experience to do what their role needs of them, but they also do carry the values and live the values of Veracity, at least within those 9 to 5 or 8 to 10, whatever time that might be for the day. And so a big thing for us is, integrity. Our name stands behind that. Veracity is the propensity to tell the truth. And so those things are extremely important, that we approach things with integrity. A big one for me is flexibility. It's having the flexibility to change. We're still small. We now have more specific roles, but we still have to dig in and do things when it needs to happen. But it's also flexible in how we work with our employees, and it's flexibility in how we approach clients, and showing people grace when somebody messes up, right? So those things are extremely important to me. Curiosity is one of our core values. I think that, if you look at our website, it talks about us being problem solvers. There's technology changes every single day. And we're often asked, how do you keep up with that? Well, we keep up with it by learning with our clients. We're able to take learnings and teach other clients. We have people who are lifelong learners. And so if you're into technology, you're probably constantly figuring out what's the latest and greatest new thing that's happening. But because technology is ever evolving, when we approach a challenge that a client may have, one of our customers, what we're really doing is being problem solvers, because there's a chance that we've never touched that particular piece of technology because it may be that new. And I'm a firm believer that you can't have good problem solving without being curious. And so that natural curiosity, it's how we ask questions and approach things. And then accountability. I worked with a coach who basically said, sometimes you have values that you have these core set of values within you, and they can get you to here, but sometimes those same values are not the same values that are going to get you to the next level. And crazy enough, this last year, we added accountability as a core value to our organization. And that is accountability to ourselves. So I'm accountable as a leader for what I say I'm going to do, and accountable to be there to support you. It's accountability to our peers within our organization. I feel a huge sense of accountability to our clients, and that we're going to do what we say we're going to do. And then accountability that we have to our community is a big part of our core values. One of our core values at Veracity is community. And we look at that not just as the Kansas City community. We're in 23 different states. And we want to make sure that our community is not just here in the Kansas City area, but that community to us also includes the Veracity community, our people, and that our people then can take out to the community in which they also live in, that they can help, thrive there as well. So those are a few of those things, but those are heavily on my heart and on my mind every single day when I'm at work and when I communicate with our team. We have a tendency to talk about the values in a way. I know that I personally, in a meeting or as a follow-up to a meeting, I will send an email and talk about certain attributes of things that happen that connected to our core values, that I'm hoping that we can continue to kind of filter throughout the organization.
That's really fascinating. We discussed this a little bit yesterday, and I thought it would be insightful for you to talk about it, as you are problem solvers, and clients and prospective clients are coming to you looking for solutions for problems. Is there a degree where folks are coming to you thinking they have a technology problem and the problem is elsewhere, and they're looking for a technological fix thinking that it's a technological problem? and that's not the case. And I would love to hear how you speak to that communication to the client as you're assessing what the true problem is.
Sure. Yeah. So it's, this happens. I think it happens to all of us with, you probably see this with your client base too, Matt, right? Like sometimes we come with this as a particular need, but that might just be a Band-Aid to something else. I shared with you yesterday, and I'll share with the group. Right now, one of my favorite books is called Getting Naked. It's a business fable, and it is a story, a business storybook that is really about approaching things in an authentic and vulnerable way. And so the thing that I talk to my team about, and when I'm in front of customers, if it's me in front of the customer, I kind of get down to that premise of getting naked, of that vulnerability spot, of having that honest conversation, of trying to, number one, ask all these questions to try to truly understand where their pain points are. But there are scenarios when we get in and a client may want to, they may want to purchase a particular software or implement something specific because they think that's going to solve their problems, when often it's culture, it's change management, it's the people and the process around it as well. And one of the things that if you've heard You Never Get Fired from Hire and Deloitte, Veracity doesn't have that name, right? So we're the company that is, we have to come in and do a great job. And the worst thing that we can do is take on a project with a client and implement something because they think it's going to solve their problem if we truly believe that it's not. And so we have that honest conversation and talk with them about where we see the gaps that they may have around that. And it's one of those places of if you go into a situation like that without the fear of losing out on something, it changes your perspective a little bit, right? So if you really think that we're having this conversation because this is the right thing to do, it turns out to be not that difficult. And thankfully we have team members on our team who are passionate about doing the right thing for the people that we serve. And that oftentimes means that we're not going to take things on if we think that it ultimately could not be in the best interest of a client. But yeah, that happens. It doesn't happen often, don't get me wrong, but it certainly does happen. And so we also, because of that, try to take an approach of a very small, even if it's a 1 week to 2 week assessment, that we try to take approach as a phase 0 or phase 1 to a project, so that we make sure that when we come out of that discovery, that our partners know exactly what it is that we are seeing from the outsider looking in, to help them see things maybe that they're too close to, and then present with them a proposal to move forward. And that's kind of where, for us, where the rubber meets the road. Is that going to be a new project for us, or is it not? But it's all about, again, coming in alignment with where they are and how we might be able to help them solve that problem.
Seems a lot like relationship building.
Yep.
Those foundational blocks. You're in IT, you're a technology company. The industry in of itself seemed to have already had a higher percentage of employees working from home, in the overused phrase, the new normal, and other words that have been overused, like unprecedented times. I'm interested, what challenges, even as an IT, has this new post-COVID-19 work environment maybe surprised you, or interesting challenges of your leadership in your company?
Yeah, that's, I think everybody's finding this right now. So that's a great question. So I would have told you 6 months ago that if we had to move completely virtual, that there would be no hiccup whatsoever, because Veracity has been, up until last September, I guess coming up on almost 2 years now that we've been in Overland Park, up until company. So we, as far as our operations team, our employees who serve our clients many of them are on site, still some of them work remotely, but we probably have 75 to 80, 90 people who would go into a client site every day. So while the rest of us were used to working from wherever we needed to be, that we had a whole team of people who didn't. And I think the biggest challenge hasn't been technology. Well, we did do a nice little survey, probably about a month, 6 weeks into COVID. And the biggest challenge for everybody's been internet service, right? It's like you never really thought that your issue would be on Zoom and it's hanging up, or it's disconnecting, or whatever it might be. And so that's been a common issue that everybody has seen, that I think, and when we talked through those, that was the one question that I was like, okay, we were really hoping to find out information what was we can support you, but we can't fix that one, right? But what we can fix is talking about style and boundaries. So I, as a leader, have never, ever been worried about people working from remotely. I have always been a firm believer that it's not about how much you work, it's about what you get done. And so productivity was never a concern of mine. I think it used to be for a lot of people. If I can't see my people working, then they may not be working. I think the opposite is often true for what we do, that the issue becomes you never don't work. So, we're really monitoring our teammates, checking in, doing a lot of check-ins. And, one of our leads that I adore, that I'd never want to get burnt out, one of the issues was how much that she was working. And I asked, is this a byproduct of a project that is very, very intense? Or is this a byproduct of boundaries? Probably come both. And so we've done a lot of intentional talking to people about how do you create those boundaries when your office is just over there and I can just go back in there and do that. Like, I live that life and live that world. But I've always said it's because I own the company and I'm so attached to it that I never get away, and where I don't want other people to have to live that. And so that's been a complete psychological challenge for everybody of how do I get away from that? The other thing that I think has been interesting is the connection with people. So people thought we would be less connected. I have found that we've almost been more connected because it's been so intentional. I mean, so often we come and go in the office and we see one another, so we feel like we've connected, but we haven't. And now we're able to be more intentional, and it's been a really great thing for us. And as I mentioned, those employees in the 23 or so different states, I think there used to be this, oh, well, our home office in Overland Park, like those people are all this has kind of put us all back on an even playing field. So it's really allowed us to connect to individuals in different places and say, hey, you can call me anytime you want, just like the person who lives 5 miles from me can. I don't see them any more often than I see you, because that's just kind of how it's been recently. And so I think that it's allowed us to have this camaraderie in a way that we hadn't had before. So we're doing the virtual, not happy hours. We're doing virtual happy hours. Of course we are. And now we're having drinks with people that could never have come into our office to get together with us. We're going to be doing some virtual team builders. Well, we would have never thought to do a virtual team builder before. We would have gone to Blade and Timber or something like that and connected in that way. And now we're doing virtual escape rooms with folks that we would never spend time with. So I think that's been one of the best outcomes for us in this whole process.
Great. So I'm going to spin it a little bit and ask you to kind of talk about what you feel like is your greatest professional accomplishment thus far to date.
Yeah, that's a challenge. There's a lot I'm proud of, but it's for me, it's so often so proud of the team and proud of how we've kind of come together and continue to grow with one another. And so that gives me a lot of pride. But I think that one of the things that I'm most proud of is when, we can look at goal setting and we can say, hey, this is what we want to do this year, and this is where we are to goal. And it's, those things end up being about growth. And growth is good. I want us to continue to grow because that allows us to have more opportunities for our team members and do more things. But I think the thing that does make me the most proud is when I look at our growth and I go to our P&L and I go to that line item, giving or, whatever that may be. It makes me extremely proud when I see that number grow. It is a number that when when I have somebody on the team that has visibility of the entire P&L that says, oh my gosh, like, what are we doing? And I'm like, this is what we're growing for. And it pleases me, right? It's the thing that I feel like our why of why we continue to do what we do. So that is, I think, that probably the biggest thing that I feel proud of, the way that we're able to support the community, that I think that most companies our size probably, not that they don't, or they, maybe they wouldn't have the ability to, but that's almost our existence, is to take care of people, which includes our employees, our clients, and our community. And so that piece really makes me proud.
So as a leader, sometimes some of our biggest challenges is getting the feedback from our employees as to what may or may not be working all that well, or what they're seeing, because they're actually on the ground in the trenches. Not that we aren't, but they're living it day by day. Mm-hmm. Being a consultant and having folks with that innate curiosity, are you able to? Do you have the folks that are able to give you feedback when you feel like you're maybe going off the tracks, or you haven't considered an aspect of maybe a new endeavor that you're looking towards? And if you don't have that, how are you building towards getting that 360 feedback that leaders need to propel organizations forward?
Yeah. Well, probably two parts. From a personal standpoint, I try to do a 360 with different people on my team, and then work towards that for me personally as a leader, which I think is a different question than the business 360 of what is it. So we created, we're working really hard to create our own innovation hub within Veracity, and to where when people have ideas that can go through a process, whether it's a new solution or service product, that we should consider. So Patrick Shore, that's on our team, does this for our clients, and we've decided, hey, this is such a great thing that we're selling it to our clients. Why are we not using it ourselves? And it's actually produced a new service for us this year around cybersecurity vulnerability assessments. Is something that we've had the skill sets within our company to do, but we've never offered it. And that truly happened because we listened to our people who were out in the field understanding what's going on. And that would have been a scenario that would have been really easy for an employee to say, hey, how come Veracity doesn't do this? It would have been really, really easy for somebody on the team, on my leadership, we just don't do that. And you know how you inadvertently shoot people down and you don't know that you are. You're like, oh, thanks for that suggestion, but we just don't do that. Well, that doesn't feel good, and just diminishing to people that you're not hearing them. And so we've, again, kind of put in this process internally with the innovation that we will allow things to come through this funnel so that people can create new ideas. But when they do come up with new ideas, it's kind of putting skin in the game for them, because it's, they have to create the business case for it. And it kind of really puts them in the mindset of not of the owner, but of leadership to say, hey, if we're going to go do this, what is the cost of doing that? What is our potential return? Does it make sense to do it? And get them in the process of understanding how that works. So that's one part of that I think that we have not always done, that we are trying to get better at doing. Another thing is that I really rely on having a team around me of people who are experienced smarter than me, right? Who maybe this is their expertise that I want to tap on. Because one of the worst things to me is a yes ma'am type of person. So if I'm talking about stuff, I'm an ideas person. I'm futuristic. I'm always thinking about 5 years down the road. And sometimes when you're thinking 5 years down the road and you're not necessarily thinking about what's happening today, I can come up with a lot of ideas. I can be like, why are we not thinking about this or doing this? And it really, if people just went and spun off and did the things that comes out of my head, it would not be a good thing. And so I really rely on people to kind of be like, oh, okay, let's bring it back to earth, Ange. Let's kind of think through that. Those are things that are important to me, and I talk about them. And I think that I say, I want your feedback. I don't just say I have an open door. I have an open door. So please come and talk to me. And I think I mentioned to you, I did mention this to you yesterday, and to me, it's such a good analogy of so loyal to you that they believe in your leadership so strongly that they will follow you anywhere and even follow you off of the end of a cliff if that's what you go and do. And I always say that is a lot of pressure for a leader. Like that is a tremendous amount of pressure for me that you believe in me so strongly when you might have had a pair of binoculars and you saw that I was about to walk off the edge of the cliff. Like, help me, right? Like, and I really do talk to my team in the way that I need them as much as they need me. I mean, I need them more to wrap around and help us succeed. And so those are the things that are super, super important to me, is be surrounded by people who are passionate about what we're trying to accomplish and who are confident and willing to tell me when I'm wrong. Because I always say to people, like, I may have an opinion and I may not have an opinion. So tell me what you think, because I might be looking for the answer myself. And then I'm an opinion that's in your opinion, but I always tell people that change my mind. I'm definitely, I love that, that conflict that creates really great thinking and change. So that's kind of how I operate. And I hope that my team feels that. I think there are many people who, if you're new to the organization, I can tell you that, but they might be like, I've heard that before and that's not really how it is. So they have to kind of go through that experience to see how that goes with me, to know that that's how it really is at Veracity. It certainly is how it really is with me. And I'm trying to share that, to all of the folks that work with me, is that I hope to be the same way.
Great. So what aspect or aspects of being a business owner do you enjoy the most? And what aspect, if you could, would you most want to eliminate from the things that you have to do?
Oh boy, that's tough. I mean, I can come up with a lot of things of what's great about it, and I can come up with a lot of things that's not great about it, which I don't think is appropriate for the audience. But I'll, tongue in cheek, just being a complete smart aleck, I love being a business owner because I don't like being told what to do. And I know that that's crazy. Like I have a ton of accountability. Don't get me wrong. I am very accountable to this organization. What was it? I think it was a disc test I took years ago that said, Angela believes that rules exist for a reason, but not to be followed by her. I sometimes think that could be true. And, as we've grown, one of the challenges and things I've most liked, I told Linda Marshall, our head of VP, I'm like, I don't want to hear the P word anymore. I don't want to hear process and I don't want to hear policy. And as you get bigger, what do you realize? Process and policy. But those are things that I think I've enjoyed as a business owner, is that I have a tremendous amount of flexibility. When I see something that feels wrong, not what I think is wrong, but what I feel is wrong and how we're doing things, I have the ability to change and create that change within the organization. I love being in a position to saying, yes, let's go do that, even though it's not the profit margin that, we would seek. Because it's the right thing to do to help somebody. I love being able to do that. What are the things that I don't love as much? There's a lot of pressure. There's a ton of responsibility. I don't think that I would move away from that. Kathy Nelson with the Sports Commission always says that pressure is a privilege. And I truly believe that it is, but there are massive times of decision making that you sometimes feel alone. While I have my executive committee, I also have a YPO program, for example, that I really, really rely on. I have other peer groups that I rely on, but sometimes being the ultimate person to make that decision can be really tough. Even though I said previously that I like that, it's probably one of the toughest things too. I think there's been more emotions wrapped around it than I thought. I thought this is all business, but being a business owner feels pretty emotional. And so sometimes that, there can be heartbreak in scenarios that should not impact me in that way. My empathy just may sometimes take over things. And so that becomes a challenge as a business owner. But outside of that, Matt, I would not change it for the world. I don't know. There are mistakes that I've made that I've learned from, but I'm not sure I would do anything different. It's it's pretty phenomenal. I do love it.
Well, it shows. It shows. Before we turn it over to Q&A from the general audience, I'm going to ask more of a light question. And are there any books that you're currently reading or books that you've read in the past that you would recommend other than the Getting Naked, which you've already referenced?
Right, which is great, and everybody should read it. You know, funny enough, this is an older book, but reading the What Got You Here Won't Be There, I think that's the title of it. So I think that is one, especially as you're evolving and growing, right? It's kind of like our accountabilities was not, and now it's one of our core values, wasn't before. What is another book that I'm reading? Well, I just ran, you know, on a personal note, gosh, Glennon Doyle, right? I'm always reading something that's going to help me from that perspective of creating more. Not that I need to create more vulnerability; it can be an issue sometimes. But that was Untamed, I think, was the name of that book. Trying to think what else is sitting on my counter right now, my nightstand. Been reading Traction. I think it's a great book, but you know, I think the challenge with books like that is, as you already have your operating model kind of created and going, I think a challenge for any entrepreneur, especially as you're going through a growth stage, or actually no matter where you are, if you kind of have something that works, some of those books can be so overwhelming that it might make you start evaluating, gosh, maybe I need to change the way I'm doing this. And it's like, no, we already have a system in place for feedback, or we already have our goal setting strategic plan in place. I don't know if I want to go back and start implementing something new. I think that's one of the challenges. You can glean really great things from those, but sometimes it can take you down a rabbit hole as well. So yeah, I can't think of anything else I'm really reading right now that's just, I wasn't expecting that question, nor was I looking at my nightstand or my bookshelf, which I know.
Well, I really enjoyed this facilitation and getting your thoughts and your perspectives. And now is probably the appropriate time to open it up for general Q&A for the folks that are with attendees of this meeting.
Great.
Thanks, Matt. I'm going to kick it off with one question while everyone's kind of gathering their thoughts. Angie, I wanted to follow up on the values conversation, where you talked about the inherent core values of the company and making sure that, you know, everyone was on board with that and that they live the values. And so how do you, even though now you're large enough that you don't personally have a hand in all of the interviewing, how do you make sure that you're checking for values with every new hire that you make and then on board for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have we have our HR team, and then we have a recruiting team that is kind of within HR but different, just because they're almost so we have this brand foundation. So probably about 4 years ago, I felt things were shifting a little bit in our organization. We were growing, which was great, but in that growth, my gut told me that something's off, something's just not right. And so I hired a company to come in and interview all of our team and basically say, if we tell you this, but you come back to us who we are and what we are. And within that, we really brought to life all of our core values. And so we have this, I think, what is a very great PowerPoint that kind of talks about Veracity, why we exist, why we're here, and then what our core values are of the organization. And so our team kind of uses that. When we have an onboarding session, tomorrow we're going to be doing a roundtable, which is no more than 8 to 10 people, employees of Veracity, who wouldn't typically have access to me. It'll just be us on Zoom, and then I talk to them about whatever it is they want to talk about, and our core values will be brought up. So during the onboarding session, though, when a new employee starts, another great benefit of the pandemic has been that, you know, they would have an orientation, and Amy, our head of HR, would say, "Hey, Angie, if you could stop by, that would be great if you could stop in and say hi." Well, because of my calendar and being all over the place, that just rarely did it happen. And I told Amy, I'm like, no more are we going to do orientations of one-off. And if I can stop in, I stop in. Now our orientations are set, and it's a Zoom meeting, and everybody gets to come in, because if you need to pop in for this, that. And so what I talk about during that time is our brand foundation. It's like, again, it's back to our why, and our why is our values. So I've said that we'll be an organization moving forward that will hire and fire based on values. And that's a tough thing to say when you're looking for a very niche technology skill set, right? You're like, well, but we really needed this kind of behaviors, but we do say we may not share the same core values, Tracy, but when you're here, these core values are your operating guide for decision making and for the way we treat people, and that's what we talk about.
Great, thank you. All right, everyone, your turn. Feel free to unmute yourself and just ask your question. And I think our group is a perfect size. You can just do that, or you can put it in the chat, and I'm happy to ask the question for you. Time to dig into the heart and soul of an entrepreneur. Otherwise, I have another question. So while you're thinking, it goes back to really the beginning of the presentation when we were talking about diversity and inclusion, and it's a topic that's come up with our board of directors, several times. And the goals that companies have, sometimes are difficult to achieve, not just with the supplier connections, but with internal hiring. And what advice do you have for companies, both large and small? I think the goals are the same, regardless of the size of the company, and how they can begin to implement hiring and then expand that into the supplier set.
Yeah, that's it's something that we think about all the time, right? We go look at our website and we're like, what are we doing from an employee base? We have a high amount of females, a high percentage, I would say, and a lot of percentage of minorities as well. And we try to say, okay, we're going to hire for a new position. How are we looking at our base, right? We're want to interview and find the best person. But I think part of it is cultivating talent as well. And so as we look within our own organization, who is interested, who has raised their hand, and how do we then develop folks so that they can end up in a leadership position should that arise? And I don't know what your answer would be to that, but I don't think there's a magic answer to it other than being more aware and more intentional, and having open dialogue and communication so that people of any subset knows that they are valued and that they have the opportunity. And because if you're not talking about it, then I think that's where failure often happens, is that fear of not talking about it. And then folks on your team may not, feel like they want to raise their hand. And I think that has to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And this kind of moves forward from that, not specific to diversity and inclusion, but just for great professional development in general. Elisa Waldman asks, how do you train your employees to be leaders in addition to being great technicians?
That's a good question. I think it's different for everybody. We have some great technicians who have become leaders within our organization, but I think it's been more of probably an unintentional training, but more of a constant coaching. So another thing that we've started doing is strength finders. So I hired a new executive coach this last year, and everything that we do is built around strengths. And so we've given people the opportunity to take strength finders and kind of understand their strengths and how they can leverage those to be better at, from a leadership perspective. And the thing that I was surprised about, my number one strength is developer. So I would have told you years ago that I can't coach any. I played volleyball in college and then was asked to help a freshman volleyball team. I couldn't understand why they couldn't pass the ball. So my coaching them was hammering balls at them harder to figure out why they couldn't do it. So I literally was like, I cannot coach. And of course, Teresa, my executive coach, was like, no, you just need some new techniques. But innately, what is in you is being a developer. And so I personally talk to my team all the time of understanding kind of what their goals are, or how can we change this or that. But I also talk to them about how are you developing your people as well. And some of those folks are technicians and some of them are not. We've had technicians who want to get into leadership roles because they feel like that's a progression to their career, right? It's like, hey, if I have goals, like what I need to be a team lead, and then I need to do this. And sometimes those technicians, when they get into those roles, they no longer like their job because what they loved was this other piece. And so this unique skill set to have somebody who's so deep in their technology, but also want to do more of a leadership role. And so it's just kind of learning what they want to do and then helping them get there.
All right, others. Does anyone want to unmute and ask their question themselves?
Tracy, this is Carol Lehman from Johnson
Hi, Carol.
Community College. I'm following our dean, Elisa Waldman, with a question. I'm impressed about the hire and fire based on values. During the interview, what kind of discussions or questions, if Angela could give an example, how do you find out what a person's values are during that important interview?
So thanks, Carol, for that question. So I'm not asking much of our staff that I can talk to when I'm interviewing somebody who's going to report directly to me, because that tends to be where that happens with me. And so what I do is I have an open dialogue more so, and we'll talk about values. And as I talk a lot about Veracity's values, and I give examples of how certain people in our organization live those values. For example, I could say Chris, who's our VP of our federal operations. Chris has done such a phenomenal job of living the values of accountability within our organization by XYZ. I could say that Linda lives and breathes flexibility because something's constantly being asked of her that is taking her off of her day. And the way that she shows grace and takes care of business when she needs to is a phenomenal use of flexibility. And so I might ask them then of our core values. And by the way, they're on all of our whiteboards in every room. Whiteboard. They're stickers up above there. And we intentionally did that so that people would have them in front of them all the time so that they could be thinking about those things. So, you know, when I had somebody in the office, just last week, we were doing some interviews. We had them in an open space downstairs. And I was like, oh man, they're not gonna be able to see our values. Well, I forgot that we had put our values on one of our big conference rooms. So instead of doing the frosting, just normal frosting, we actually have our values. And the very cool thing was that the person that we're interviewing was actually facing that. And that person ended up using our values because I talked about them so much. I get to where I talk about them so much, it's almost impossible for somebody else to not start using that as part of their conversation. And those things happen. So I don't know if it was intentional as much as it probably could be. But the byproduct of me talking about it so much is that they start talking about those things.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Other questions?
Hey there, this is Lindsay Weathers.
Oh,
Hi,
Lindsay.
Hey, I just had a question about, in the early years, how did you divide your time between pushing/selling your product versus creating/developing your program or product?
Yeah, so since we have a service, we're service-based much like you guys are. And I already, when I started the company, there was 3 things we were gonna focus on. And so I didn't have to do so much development there. It was me selling, but this is gonna sound awful, I don't deliver anything. So one of our abilities to scale is because I do not have the abilities to do what our employees do for our clients every day, right? So I have the understanding, and I know how we've helped other clients, I know how we've done these things, but once it gets to a place, my ability to turn that over to somebody to deliver that has been a real blessing for us. But in that, it's, for us, it hasn't been so much having to now focus on innovation as a way to create and cultivate new service or product lines because our clients are constantly telling us what they need. And so it often comes through in the sales process. You know, we know our skill sets and our core competencies, but it's our clients who are largely driving those things. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but for us, it's been slightly different. I spent in the early years, Lindsay, I spent all my time doing business development.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Great. We have time for another question or two. If anyone still has thoughts that they would like to close the loop on. All right, if not, then I'm going to thank Angela very much for sharing her morning with us. I can't thank you enough for telling us a little bit about the development of your business, but most of all, about your leadership style. And I think you've given us all great insights, regardless of what kind of business or organization we're at, regardless of where we are in the process, whether with a long established business or more entrepreneurial. I know we've got all kinds of people in all stages of growth on the call. And we really, I know I took a lot of notes. I think others probably did too. We've learned a lot from you this morning, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us. And Matt, of course, your great leadership and sponsorship and facilitation of the conversation this morning. We appreciate both of you and the leadership that you give to us in the region. And you know, if we were in our normal facilities, you would hear, you know, lots of clapping and some cheering, and we wouldn't let you probably out of the room for very long. We know lots of people would have some follow-up questions for you, but we thank you very much. For everyone else, appreciate you being with us this morning. Want to give you just a couple of very quick reminders. Tomorrow we have the very first in our Fireside Chat series at 3 o'clock. Our featured guest is going to be Dr. Andy Bound, the president of Johnson County Community College. We also have, very importantly, from 11 to 3, we are sponsoring a blood drive here at the Chamber office. We encourage you to make an appointment. It's not absolutely necessary, but you can just easily go on our website and make an appointment. There are still a couple of slots left, and I encourage you to join me in giving the gift of life for that. Other than that, all business today is concluded. Thanks again, Angela. Thanks again, Matt. And we'll see you all again very soon. Have a great day and have a great tournament, Angela.
Thank you.
It's going to be a hot one.
Yes, it is.
We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.